Do artists really stink at time management? I actually want to talk a little bit more about what it looks like to manage your energy and not just manage your time. When it comes to cultivating a creative practice, the number one thing that I hear from artists across the board is that they just don't have enough time to make art. But I want to challenge that. I think there's something a little bit deeper, so that's what I want to talk about in this video today. Welcome back to my channel. My name is Wendy Brightbelt, and I help artists go from hobby artist to professional artist. And the number one thing that you need to have in place in order to be a professional artist is a creative practice, and hopefully a prolific creative practice. It's one of the things that I think is maybe the first thing that goes out the window anytime our schedules fill up, and I don't think it should be. I think that as artists, we should be prioritizing our creativity and protecting it like it's sacred, because it is. So I actually think that there's more to this story than just not having enough time in our days for making art. And I think we have to really evaluate what is it that is keeping us from creativity and why. And now, one of the things that I know, because I have interviewed and talked to so many different artists. In fact, I've worked with over 8,000 artists, almost 9,000 artists now. And one of the things that I notice is that as a culture, we just do not value creativity for the sake of creativity's sake. You know, we find other ways, and we value productivity over creativity. And I think that as an artist and as a community of artists, it's up to us to change that. And so I want to share with you some different tips for managing your energy as an artist, and therefore prioritizing your creative practice and just keeping that space sacred in your life. So I want to share a little bit about my own journey as an artist. And really, I share this to kind of give you a peek at, where I'm coming from as an artist and how my creative practice even began. So I actually found art making at a really bizarre time in my life. I think in some ways it was a blessing for me, because I actually had two young daughters that were under the age of 3. And so, as you can imagine, my life was insanely busy. I literally didn't have time. In fact, my youngest, I couldn't even hardly leave her alone. My youngest, who's my middle daughter now, but I couldn't leave her alone when she was super young, because she was crazy. She was jumping off of every piece of furniture that we owned, and she had to be supervised at all times. And so what I found is that in some ways it was a blessing for me to be more busy, because I had to really make the best use of my time. And so what I would do is I would get little spurts of time, and I would make the most of, just 10 minutes here and 10 minutes there. And so I knew what it was to not have a lot of physical time in my life. And so because I think that was my beginning into having a creative practice. I learned from the beginning that you actually don't need hours upon hours of time. And that is my story. And I have found that, we all go through different seasons where our schedules are fuller at different times than others. And it's important to prioritize our creativity. So I'm going to share with you just some tips in terms of really making the space for a creative practice in your life. So the first one I want to talk about is the importance of honoring the creative cycle. And I think that sometimes, especially in our culture where we value always having some sort of purpose and the fact that, we have to constantly be producing as human beings, that sometimes we forget to honor rest in our creative cycle and just make time and space for rest. And also within those boundaries to allow yourself to have just time to play in the studio, not to make art to sell or for a collection or for your next art show, but just to make art to feed your soul. And I think that it's so incredibly important to honor that rest, because if you don't honor rest in your creative cycle, then you're just going to end up getting burnt out. And so even if it's just taking one afternoon, one day to just let yourself be, it might not even be that you're just sitting around doing nothing. I think sometimes we have this idea of rest as I'm just sitting there twiddling my thumbs, but it could just be letting yourself clean your studio, put things back. Sometimes it means going to get something new to put my supplies in, or finding something to inspire me again. Maybe it's going to the thrift store, maybe it's buying a new material or supply. Anything that makes space for rest in my life and gets me excited about creating again. It could also be something like going for a walk, going on a creative field trip. I mean, when's the last time you visited a museum or a park that inspires you? Going on a trip, maybe a getaway for the weekend, just to get outside of your life and do something that refreshes you. So that's tip number one for making space for your creative practice. And tip number two, I think, is something that I have picked up along the way in listening to a lot of other creative women and artists who I mentor. This is probably one of the most important things to really watch for in your business and in your creative life. And that is to really look at what is it that is draining your energy. And that's why I talk about managing your energy over managing your time, because sometimes it's not the fact that we don't have an hour at the end of the day to make art. It's just that when we get to the end of our day, sometimes we are so spent, we're so exhausted from taking care of everyone else in our lives that we forget to make space or time for creativity. And so one of the things that I invite you to look at is, what is it in your life today, right now, that is draining you from all of your energy? And how can you change that? Do you need to set better boundaries? Do you need to say no to all those coffee dates that you're going on? Do you need to limit your caretaking time? I think that's one of the most challenging things for artists and creatives is that, especially women, is that we are the caretakers of the family, and we're often so busy taking care of everyone else that we don't think about making time and space for our own creative practice. And so I invite you to look at how you can set up boundaries better in your life. And maybe it's something creative that you can start doing. I know that for me, one of the most powerful things that I have done for my creative practice and for running a creative business has been to actually delegate some of those daily tasks that end up taking up so much of my time. So, for example, one of the things that I've started doing is paying for a meal planning service. It's something like I'm paying something like $10 a month to have these meal plans in my inbox every week where I can print out a grocery list and all my meals are planned for me so that I don't have to waste that 30 minutes to an hour at the end of the day going, what am I going to make for dinner tonight? Those things. Another thing that you can think about is delegating, cooking, delegating cleaning. I know that there have been seasons of my life where we paid for a house cleaner to come clean our house. And that was one of the best decisions that I've ever made as a creative person. So finding where some of those gaps are and delegating some of those everyday mundane tasks so that you can have more creativity in your life is so incredibly important, as well as looking at cutting out some of those things that end up just draining your energy. And I want to say along those same lines to really evaluate what time of day you are feeling at your best and try to fit creativity in that space of time, and not, let's say, if at the end of your day you're just completely spent, try, creating earlier in the day and have it be something that you do first thing instead of waiting for all of the leftovers and giving that part of yourself to your creativity. So, tip number 3 kind of goes along with the story that I shared at the beginning, where I had to learn early in my creative practice to just use 10 minutes at a time. And that is stop waiting until you have hours to be creative. Most people are not going to find a 3 to 4 hour block of time every single day just for art making. Look for 10 to 20 minutes in your day that you can devote to creativity and be consistent. And not only that, really look at what is your focus for that specific point in time and really find a way to have a focus for that block of time. Because I guarantee you, let's say one of your goals in your creative practice is to get better at something. Let's say you want to get better at drawing. If you take 10 minutes a day for the whole entire year to just devote to drawing a sketch every day, I guarantee you, you will be 1,000,000 times better by the end of that year, and you will be amazed at how much you have grown. So it's not just about having hours of time, it's about taking very intentional, focused, small moments of time. Those moments are what is actually going to shift the needle and make you better as an artist. And I am going to actually return to this in another video where I share more about the rule of 100 hours, because that is a really cool concept that I want to dive into a little bit deeper with all of you. And if you're wondering what it is, just go Google it and you'll see what I'm talking about. Tip number 4, I kind of already touched on this a little bit, but it's important that you make art during the time of day when you have the most energy. You know, some of you, it will be, you know, late at night. It might be after everyone in your house has already gone to bed, right? That's when you feel like you are the most creative and able to plug into your creative practice the best. It might be that you actually do best on a weekend day. And that's kind of what my creative practice has been lately. I have been setting aside Sundays, not the whole day on Sunday, but most of the day on Sunday, just for my studio. Sometimes if it fits other times in the week, like Fridays, I often have a little bit more time. Saturdays are kind of iffy, but sometimes at the end of a Saturday, I will be able to fit my creativity into that time. I know that I was speaking to one of my artists in my mentorship program, and she was at the time extremely busy. She was a hairstylist. She was homeschooling 3 of her kids, and she owned her own hair salon. And she literally had hardly any time in her day. And one of the things that she learned from my mentorship program is she learned how to take just 10 minutes every morning before all of the craziness started and devote that time to her creative practice. And so I think that you have to look at, when do I have the most energy and how can I reserve some of that time for my creative practice during my day or my week, right? Tip number 5 is for all of you hobby artists who are wanting to go from hobby artist to professional artist. And this is a little bit of tough love for all of you, okay? I'm gonna tell you like it is. I want you to start treating your creative practice as if it's your job, because it is, right? I don't know how many, artists who are thinking, oh, I really would love to, make it big as an artist. And yet they are not committed to their creative practice. They're not committed to building skills or getting better as an artist, and they're not making art every day, right? The only way that you are going to start loving the art that you're making and have people, want to purchase your art and make irresistible art for collectors is through getting better and having a prolific art practice. And so I think one of the biggest roadblocks in terms of this mindset for a lot of artists is that they have this mindset of, I have to earn art making, right? Like I have to get all the other things done in my day before I deserve the opportunity to make art. And that is just so ridiculous. You know, so many artists that I talk to have this mindset that, you know, art making is something frivolous to do with their time, when it is important. And it's not just, you know, the artists who take their art practice seriously, those are the ones who are going to go so much farther as an artist, right? And also it's so incredibly important for us as creatives because it feeds our souls, right? And I think almost every artist that I talk to, they are one of the most sensitive groups of people. And so we are miserable human beings if we're not painting, if we're not creating, if we're not, you know, getting into that creative flow on a day-to-day basis. You know, I know for myself, if I haven't been painting, I'm not a fun person to be around. And so I want you to shift your mindset and start treating your creative practice like it's your job, because it is. Okay, tip number 6. Another thing that I think can often stand in the way of managing your energy and also creating art on a regular basis and being in that creative flow state that we all love is that we can easily get into overwhelm when it comes to running the business side of our art practice, right? So things like, you know, listing paintings, selling our art, shipping our art, posting on social media, marketing, all of those things take up so much time and space. And I would just recommend that, especially in today's day and age, that you really start being mindful of, you know, one, how much are you consuming versus creating in your life? You know, if you are consuming more content on a regular basis than you are creating, my guess is you probably have a lot more time on your hands than you realize. Are you watching more YouTube videos than you are painting in the studio? Are you scrolling on Instagram for, you know, an hour at night when you could be painting or, you know, playing in the studio? I want you to really think about that. But going back to sort of that overwhelm, right? One of the things that I coach a lot of artists about is the importance of establishing systems in your business and how incredibly important it is to do that. And so if you have your systems in place for the business side of your art business, right? All of the, you know, social media, all of that kind of stuff. If you can put systems into place for that, then you can make more space and time for your creative practice. And so one of the things I encourage you to do is really look at how much time are you spending, you know, on marketing, and how can you streamline your schedule so that you're not doing that every single day, right? So it might be that, you know, Mondays, like every Monday you're writing a newsletter and planning out 3 social media posts, or, you know, every Monday you're batch recording videos for Instagram or YouTube, or, you know, just really look at how you can set systems up even in your workflow so that you can protect your creative practice because you have space at other times during the week where you know, oh, hey, on Monday, I know I'm going to be writing my newsletter. So actually, I don't need to worry about that. I know that, Sundays are my days for just making art, and I don't have to worry about writing a newsletter on Sundays. Having that workflow and that schedule in place, and systems, even systems for shipping, systems for, contacting galleries, all of those things will help you in the long run to make that space sacred for your creative practice. And so, tip number 7. This is probably one of the most important pieces, and that is, it's so incredibly important for you to fall in love again with a process. And so sometimes that means that you have to switch things up. Sometimes, you have to change your style or try something different, try something new. But I know that for me, when I'm excited about making art, when I have something that I've been thinking about like all day long, I literally can't wait to jump into my studio and go paint. And it's almost like this obsession thing that sort of takes over. You think about painting in the middle of the night. You have ideas, you want to get up in the morning and go finish that painting. Do whatever it takes to find that process and that way of creating that you absolutely love. Something that will get you excited about creativity once again. And so I don't know, that might mean taking a different class, learning some new techniques. It might mean, playing with, oil paints for the first time, or, learning something new that you can do with watercolors. Whatever it is, it needs to be something that gets you excited to jump out of bed in the morning and run into your studio. And with saying that, I actually want to share some of the pieces that I've been working on that I've kind of been obsessing over. In my last video, I shared a vlog about how I am taking some of the things that I learned from my last art retreat, and I am taking some of those elements and incorporating them into my own process. And so I'm actually just really obsessing over these pieces that I'm making. And some of them are just on paper, but they're some of my favorite things that I've ever done. But I want to say, it is important to know what it is in terms of the 7 elements of art that you're really going deeper in. And that's going to help you in finding your style. And this is just a side note. It's not necessarily what we're talking about today, but either line, shape, color, value, texture, space. Okay, why am I forgetting the last one? Texture, space, line, shape, color, value, form. That's because form is my least favorite. Form, texture, space. Those 7 different elements of art. So the one that I'm obsessing over right now is actually value. And so what I am diving into is these like blended values and the softening of subtle values in my work. So with that said, I think it really does help to know, yes, I am exploring texture right now. I'm exploring shape on a different level. I'm exploring line work on a different level. It's important for you to have an understanding of what it is that you're focused on in your work. So this weekend, I shared in the last vlog that I am taking some of my watercolor pieces. Hopefully you can see this. I'm taking some of my watercolor pieces and I'm adding oil paint over the top of it. And so this is one that I did over the weekend. I really love it. And this is another one that I did over the weekend. And this, I just love this so much. It just makes me so happy. And I hope you can see that I'm really exploring a lot more looser shapes and lines and kind of messier blurring. And it's really focused on creating some softness, not as much like defined edges like I normally do. And then, let's see here. There's this one. Hopefully you can see this one. This one is really fun. I like it. I feel like it's like a blurred, you know, like if you were kind of squinting your eyes, it's what you would see. And then there's this one right here. I really like this one as well. The sides are fluorescent pink. Hopefully you guys can see these. I just realized I have my camera on some cinematic, and so I'm not sure that you guys can see the definition of the painting, so I'll have to look. But that one was a revamp. So, like I was saying, it's important to find a process and a point of inspiration that fuels your creative practice so that you're excited to paint again. And that's what I've been experiencing in my own life recently. And it's so important to find that jumping off place for your creative practice and really look at how you can consistently show up as an artist to your practice. And so thanks for watching, and let me know in the comments which tip was your favorite and what did you really need to hear today.